Breaking news on the Supreme Court's king of condescension, Samuel Alito. The embattled justice has been the subject of both the news and the attention of Congress for his clear and demonstrated conflicts of interest. But that kind of attention doesn't worry Alito because he's smarter than everyone else, especially when it comes to the law and the Constitution. At least, that's what Alito thinks. Well, Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island has had enough and is taking action. But first, let's review how we got here. Alito has been involved in several conflict of interest issues of late, most notably the flying of flags at two separate properties that expressed solidarity with the January 6th insurrection. And while Alito made excuses for this partisanship, he blamed his wife for it, there is no excuse about his Alaskan field trip in 2008, where he stayed at a luxury fishing lodge that charges $1,000 a day and was flown there by private jet at the expense of Paul Singer, a billionaire hedge fund manager. As ProPublica reveals, Singer had cases before the court at least 10 times, but Alito never recused himself. Nor did Alito ever disclose the gifts, so odds are he never declared the value of the gifts on his income tax, which makes him guilty of tax fraud. But the flag flying controversy prompted Dick Durbin and Sheldon Whitehouse to formally ask Alito to recuse himself from cases involving Trump and the insurrection. Alito wrote back and told both men and the Democrats on the committee that he was not going to recuse himself because his actions did not rise to the standard required for recusal, letting them know in no uncertain terms that if they were only as smart as Alito, they would realize this. Poor stupid Democrats, if only they understood the law. They wouldn't be making such absurd requests, and they would realize that Alito was required to sit on these cases. Then, in a Wall Street Journal article, Alito went a step further, claiming there is no provision in the Constitution that gives Congress the authority to regulate the court. That was enough for Senator Whitehouse, who issued a formal letter today asking Alito to provide information on that interview. Whitehouse stated explicitly that the interview was improper and went on to say, "It thus appears that you offered an improper opinion regarding a question that might come before the court, did so in the context of a known ongoing legal dispute involving that precise question. This is unprecedented territory for a senator to be calling out a sitting Supreme Court justice. But Alito's behavior and his opinions are out of line. Alito prides himself as being so much smarter than the rubes and the country bumpkins that populate the Congress, but he is just flat out incorrect or willfully obtuse about the relationship between Congress and the Supreme Court. In Marbury v. Madison, the Supreme Court ruled that the Supreme Court was the chief interpreter of what is and is not constitutional, that it alone held that power, and that Congress had no ability to reverse or overturn such rulings. But that ruling does not mean Congress has no authority over the Supreme Court. It clearly does, because the Constitution allows Congress to impeach Supreme Court justices. Congress also controls the budget of the Supreme Court. The American Constitution created a series of checks and balances, and those checks are included in Congress's ability to investigate the Supreme Court. Congress is not the only entity that needs to investigate Alito. So does the IRS. It's not just a matter of disclosing these expensive trips, it's also a matter of declaring them on income tax returns. Supreme Court justices have a notoriously obscene level of receiving gifts that no other federal employees have, but that does not make the gifts tax exempt. If these guys are not reporting expensive gifts on their taxes, then they are guilty of tax fraud. And this is the difference between the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. Alito is clearly guilty of conflicts of interest and failing to recuse to the level of impeachable offenses, but there's no way that he could be impeached. Why? Because the Republicans do not care about his lack of honesty nor his wrongdoing. All they care about is having a conservative majority on the court, and they'll go to any length to support that, making excuses, double talk, hypocrisy, or their favorite, what about Hillary's emails? Whenever it comes to conservative justices and wrongdoing, the Republican Party turns into the party of Sergeant Schultz.
I know nothing. Nothing.
Did you ever notice, though, how Democrats do not do the same thing? Where's the Democratic spin for Bob Menendez? Where's the chorus claiming his innocence and that this is a witch hunt? It's not there. Democrats want to see him get a fair trial and then go to jail. So both White House and Dick Durbin from Illinois are trying to do the right thing and make the court answer for its partisanship and its corruption. But they know when push comes to shove that they can't play their ace in the hole, an impeachment hearing, because the other side is too interested in having power than it is in pursuing justice. And so Sammy Says So Alito believes he's got the power. I've got the power! In a recent editorial for the New York Times, however, Congressman Jamie Raskin, who taught constitutional law for 25 years, lays out the case for how the Constitution does, in fact, allow the Department of Justice to formally request the other justices to force Alito, and for that matter Thomas, to recuse themselves. So now the executive branch can actually start the process of regulating the Supreme Court. And even though the conservative justices on the court will most likely rally around Alito and Thomas, the process itself will demonstrate that these rogue Supreme Court justices are not above the law. And this is becoming the running theme of the Republicans. They always see themselves as above the law. This is how they should see themselves instead. I'm Anthony Vincent Gallo for Occupy Democrats.